Welcome to Bedcrime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like true crime without the drama and in a calm voice, you're in the right place. And let me just ask that after listening to or watching this video, if you find you enjoyed it or learned something, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Good morning, bedcrimers. I hope you're all having a lovely day. Today in Richard Allen's trial for the 2017 unalivings of teenagers Libby German and Abby Williams in Delphi, Indiana, a woman named Kathy Shank testified about discovering an old lead in the case files. Here's what Kathy Shank said happened. In 2022, so 5 years after the crime, Shank, who had volunteered to look through old tips about the Delphi case, came across an old lead in the files. She read a report that he was then Lieutenant Dan Doolin of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, or DNR as it's known, made back on February 18th of 2017. That's when Richard Allen came forward to self-report that he'd been on the Monon High Bridge on the day of the crime between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. That was within the window of when the crime unfolded. Remember, Libby started videotaping Bridge Guy on the Monon High Bridge at 2:13 p.m. Kathy Shank remembered that 3 girls had reported seeing a man on the bridge on the day of the crime. Kathy thought that maybe there was a, quote, possible correlation between Richard Allen and the man the 3 girls saw. Shank also noted that the tip sheet for Allen included the word cleared, but it also had Allen's name incorrectly listed as Richard Allen Whiteman. This mistake likely occurred because Allen's address at the time was on Whiteman Drive. Think about that. One error, one mistake like that meant that it took 5 years to come up with the name Richard Allen as a suspect. I can only imagine how fast Kathy's heart must have been beating. She quickly contacted the lead investigator on the case, Tony Liggett, as well as the current Carroll County Sheriff. Now, the person who spoke to Richard Allen back on February 18th of 2017 was Lieutenant Dan Doolin with the Indiana DNR. That was just a few days after the crime. Back in 2017, Lieutenant Doolin was tasked with helping investigators track down leads in the Delphi case. Back on February 18th of 2017, Doolin initially wanted to meet with Richard Allen at Allen's home, but Richard Allen said no. Doolin then suggested having Allen come down to the police station, but again, Allen said no. Allen finally suggested that he and Doolin meet in the parking lot of a Save-A-Lot store. So it was Richard Allen's idea to meet sort of casually in a grocery store parking lot. I'd always wondered about that. It seems so strange to me. It's interesting that Allen didn't want Doolin to come to his home, and that Allen also didn't want to go to the police station. And I wonder now if he was worried about being around cops at that very early time in the investigation. So during his chat with Doolin in the parking lot, Allen initially told him that he was in the area of the Monon High Bridge between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. on February 13th, the day that Libby and Abby were nabbed. But later, during the 10-minute conversation, Allen suddenly changed his timeline to between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m., so he pushed it out by a half hour. Allen also told Doolin that he saw 3 young girls when he was walking, and he parked near the Hoosier Harvest store. Per Allen, he wasn't paying attention to his surroundings as he walked that day because he was checking a stock ticker on his phone. I guess that would explain his head being down. Doolin typed his notes about this interview in a Word document and he filed it into the DNR's file system. He also gathered information from Alan's phone, but he didn't bother to look at the contents. So that's what happened in 2017. So now, fast forward to 2022, after Kathy Shank found Doolin's 2017 report, and that's when investigators contacted Doolin. Doolin was asked if he'd spoken to Alan in 2017, and he said yes. This then prompted Doolin to go into the DNR's files to see if there was any additional information about Alan. He discovered that when Alan applied for a new fishing license on April 1st of 2017, Alan reported a new height and weight. Alan changed his height from 5 feet 4 inches to 5 feet 6 inches. He also listed a different weight. Doolin found that unusual, and I would have too. After all, most adults don't suddenly grow 2 inches taller, and we know that Alan is 5 feet 4 inches tall, so he definitely hadn't grown taller. Why did he lie about his height? Was he deliberately trying to make himself seem taller than the guy who was seen in Libby's video? Or was it just a case of a short man lying about his height, wishing he was taller? And who among us, at least ladies, hasn't lied at least once as to their weight on their driver's license? I know I have. It's just 10 pounds, maybe 20. And just to put this height change on the fishing license into perspective, the Indiana State Police began sharing a still image of Bridge Guy as early as February 15th of 2017. The photo showed what appeared to be a Caucasian male with his hands in his pockets, his head down, walking on the bridge toward the girls. A few days later, the unidentified person in the photo was named the prime suspect in the case. And then, on February 22nd, the police released the Down the Hill audio. So when Alan applied for the fishing license in April, he knew the police had a photo of Bridge Guy as well as audio of him. Okay, so fast forward once again to 2022, when Kathy Shank found that tip. Steve Mullen, the police chief for the Delphi Police Department in 2017, and later an investigator for the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office, was contacted by Tony Liggett on September 21st of 2022. That's the same day that Kathy Shank found Richard Allen's report. Mullen then spoke to Doolin about the 2017 report and discovered that no one had ever followed up on Richard Allen. Mullen then did some additional research, and he found out that Allen had 2 vehicles registered to him, a 2006 Ford 500 and a 2016 Ford Focus. Tony Liggett then went to CVS and took a photo of Allen's Ford Focus. In the meantime, Mullen had gone to retrieve video from the Hoosier Harvest Store, that is hard to say, Hoosier Harvest Store, to see if Allen drove by there. And sure enough, on the video, Mullen saw a vehicle entering the frame that matched Allen's vehicle. The Ford Focus drove by on February 13th of 2017, the day of the crime, at around 1:27 p.m. Mullen couldn't see the license plate or the driver in the video, but to him, the car looked like Allen's and the rims were similar. Allen had told Doolin back in 2017 that he arrived at the CPS building around 1:30 p.m. I'm pretty sure Mullen's heart was beating fast when he saw that. So then, on October 13th of 2022, Mullen and Liggett went to Allen's house. They asked Allen to come with them to the police station, but they also told him that he was under no obligation to do so. But surprisingly, Allen agreed to an interview, and he left with them for the station. At the station, Mullen advised Allen of his rights, and I would imagine that Allen's heart was beating really fast at that point. Now, during this interview, when Allen was asked about February 13th of 2017, the day the girls disappeared, he said he'd gone to his mother's house that morning and that he was off from work that day. Alan went on to say that he returned home, got a jacket, and went to the trail. He remembered passing by 3 girls and said he was looking at a stock ticker on his phone. Alan also recalled arriving at the trail at noon and leaving at 1:30 p.m. Okay, so he changed his timeline once again for the day of the crime. Alan went on to tell Mullen and Liggett that he walked on the Monon High Bridge to look at the fish. That bridge is about 63 feet tall above Deer Creek. Are you telling me that he could really see fish from that height? That seems like a stretch. He believed he'd driven his 2016 vehicle, and he estimated that he was on the trails for about an hour. Alan recalled wearing a black or blue Carhartt jacket and blue jeans. That is also what Bridge Guy was wearing, right down to that exact jacket. Now, Alan initially agreed to let investigators look through his phone, and he provided them with the passcode, but then he suddenly changed his mind. According to Mullen, at one point Alan became agitated and walked out of the room. I'm sure he was agitated. He thought he was just there to talk about his brief time at the trails in 2017. I think he was starting to feel the heat. When Alan came back into the room, Mullen showed him the Bridge Guy picture. Alan said if the photo was from one of the Delphi victims' phones, then there's no way it could have been him. And that is when Alan terminated the interview. So I'm sure the jurors hearing all this in the testimony will be asking themselves, why did Alan get agitated if he isn't Bridge Guy? And why did he lie about the times when he was at the Monon High Bridge that day? And it's curious that Bridge Guy's head is often down, although he was walking on the bridge having to watch those planks. But again, yesterday, Sarah Carbow, a local Delphi resident, said that she saw Bridge Guy walking down the road with his head down. 13 days after Alan spoke to Liggett and Mullen, on October 26 of 2022, Richard Allen was taken into custody, and on October 31st, Indiana State Police announced that Allen had been charged for the deaths of Libby and Abby. This is a lot of circumstantial evidence, but each piece is like a brick in a wall that they're building to make a case for Richard Allen's guilt. So I'll leave you with that for today. Until the next time we meet again on Bed Crime Stories. Now smash that like button. See ya.